Welcome. And once again, my name is Deb Tauber. I'm the founder of Innovative Sim Solutions. I have my partner here, Farouz Sakandapur, and one of the things we do is consulting for places that are trying to get simulation up and started. What we can guarantee is that we can really help you out, save you a lot of money, and help you with some of the decisions that people are unfamiliar making. Between the three of us on our team, we have over 75 years of combined experience, as well as opening over 75 centers. With that, I also have the Sim Cafe, which is a podcast that has guests from across the globe every week talk about simulation and the history of it. You can see my little dog in the back, so just hopefully she won't bark. Once again, thank you, Tess, so much for being here and for doing this for us. Tess, I'm going to let you go ahead and take over here. And once again, we'll save some time at the end for questions. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box and I can go ahead and communicate those to Tess. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. I'm Tess McKinney, and I am here on behalf of a new company that I started called Xrenegades or Xrenegades. And I'll be talking today about immersive virtual reality, the future of healthcare and simulation training. If you have questions, like Deb said, just put them in the chat and we'll get them at the end. And hopefully you like my presentation. So first I'm going to cover what virtual reality is. I didn't see, if you could also put in the chat, if you've used virtual reality before, that would be super helpful. So the definition virtual reality is an artificial environment which is experienced through sensory stimuli as sights and sounds provided by a computer or a headset, and in which one's actions partially determine what happens to the environment. It's used to create or access virtual reality. So I'm going to kind of go over the history, and I'm not going to talk about all of these different things that have happened over the last 100 years, but I want to talk about at 1838, Sir Charles Wheatstone was the first to describe stereopsis, in 1838, and was awarded the Royal Medal of the Royal Society in 1840 for his explanation of binocular vision, a research which led him to construct the stereoscope. What that is the research demonstrated that the brain combines two photographs, one eye viewing each, so two photographs exactly the same, and then combines those, but it's been taken from different points to make the image appear to have a sense of depth and immersion, so a three-dimensional object. Then in 1956, the first VR machine was patented. It was a large booth that could fit up to 4 people at one time. It combined multiple technologies to stimulate all of the senses. There was a combined full color 3D video, audio, vibrations, smells, and atmospheric effects, such as wind. So it was also used in, like Disney used it in some of their theaters, that kind of thing. This was done using scent producers, a vibrating chair, stereo speakers, and a stereoscopic 3D screen. So my first time using this was obviously long after 1956 because I'm not that old, but I think it was like 1996. I actually experienced this when I went to I Shrunk the Kids in Disney World. They had wind coming at you, and so it felt like rain was spraying on you, just lots of different things like that. So that can be considered virtual reality. It's not immersive virtual reality, which we'll get into, but I just kind of want to talk about how, over 40 years, it kind of didn't change. And so it was just more of a basic virtual reality. And you can find all of this history and more at virtualspeech.com. It's a great, useful tool that you can just find all about the history of virtual reality. So next I'm going to go into terminology, because there is a lot of different kinds of terminology that is involved with immersive technologies and immersive learning. Here are just a few or a lot of different kinds of technology or terminology for this technology. I'm not going to go over all of them. You can look up different terms. It is like learning a new language, because it's not things that are normally associated with TV or laptops or that kind of thing. It's something different. So I'm going to go over a few basic concepts that are within this terminology sheet. Okay, first, I want to point out field of view. So FOV, or field of view, is short, or in context, sorry, in the context of our eyes, our field of view is everything you can see at any given moment. In the context of VR headsets, the field of view refers to everything you can see in the virtual world at any given moment. The types of VR headsets available for consumers at the time of this writing have a field of view which is smaller than what you can see with your eyes, meaning that the VR environment doesn't fill or match your eyes' field of view when using a headset. This is why you often have a black border around when you're using VR. So, for example, this is why the inside pieces are of dark material and there's a dark matter around it. This is just the space around the lenses inside of the headset. If the field of view is wide enough, though, the border can make it seem like you're looking through a pair of goggles into a virtual world, making it easy to forget that limits exist. Field of view can be measured in many different ways, and device manufacturers may not accurately represent how much you see relative to other headsets. Next, I'm going to talk about the different degrees of freedom. So there's 3DOF and 6DOF. When talking about movement and tracking in VR, people often refer to degrees of freedom. More degrees of freedom means that more of your physical movements will be tracked by the headset and mapped onto your simulated representation. The two most common are 3DOF and 6DOF, or 3 degrees of freedom and 6 degrees of freedom. Headsets that only provide 3DOF will only track your head's movements, so the roll, pitch, and yaw of your head, but not the position in space. 6DOF is available to track both your head's movements and its coordinates in the physical space. So the difference is 3DOF would be like using like a Google Cardboard or a 360 movement. So you'd only be able to move your head. You wouldn't be able to use hand controllers or that kind of thing. 6DOF is able to track, tracking is the most common form. The most common form of tracking is inside out tracking. There's also outside in tracking. This system typically relies on cameras built into the headset to track movement from the inside of the headset outwards. The Oculus Quest and Vive and all Windows mixed reality headsets like Samsung Odyssey, Lenovo, Acer headsets are examples of headsets that use inside-out tracking. There's also outside-in tracking. This can take different forms, but involves hardware external to the track spaces. So the original Vive headset that have, they're sort of like external cameras. So whereas like Oculus has these internal cameras right here, the original Vive had these stands with cameras that were on the outside. So that's how you would see the movement within those headsets, is because they would be outside in tracking. This can take different forms, but involves hardware external to the track space and not built into the headset itself. This is another reason. So those were called lighthouses, or little black boxes mounted on tripods. And so that's why those headsets are also not, the outside in headsets also needed a computer to run because it's not all built within the same system. So here's another one about room scale, seated and standing. So when you're in a headset, you need to usually you have to have a space to have the headset on, an 8x8 or a 10x10, or if you have a bigger space, that's great. But if you don't have space, then you can have a stationary mode, or a room scale mode is when you have, the 8x8 or 10x10 space. You can also be seated, or you can stand. So room scale VR is all about setting a boundary or a play area and being able to move freely. So you don't want any furniture in the room. So for me, I personally have when I built my house, I built a 16x16 space that just has walls up, has carpet in it, doesn't have any furniture in it, so that we can, use VR. Not everyone is that lucky. So as long as you have an 8x8 space to move around in, you can play VR safely. And I'll talk about space later because it is it's a huge thing to consider when you're building a VR simulation room. The idea of room scale games is being able to physically move around in the space to interact with a simulated environment. The guardian or the chaperone in different headsets show up when you actually do the room scale guardian drawing. You'll actually draw on the floor.
Tess?
Yeah.
Are you changing slides?
Oh, no, I'm not. No, I'm not changing slides. We're still talking about those. Yep. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So we're still talking about room scale, seated and standing. So then seated and standing are very similar, but if say you get motion sickness from the headset, or you have never used a headset before and you want to get oriented to it, I would suggest being seated. You can stand. Some games, like if you're driving a vehicle, it's preferred to be sitting or seated. And then some software developers have tailored their games to be able to move around in the space even though you are seated. There's also like a trackpad that you can put your feet on, that you can roll back your feet back and forth just by moving them like this, and that'll move you around the space as well. Movement and motion sickness. I want to touch a little briefly about this because almost every game that's on any VR headset or any simulation has a teleport mode, like I was talking about with the feet. It's a mode where you can use a hand controller to teleport across a space within the headset. Smooth locomotion is also a movement type. Smooth locomotion was brought up in Oculus Worlds or Horizon Worlds, and that's where you press on a stick and move around in the direction. So kind of like back in the day when you were using computer simulations, you'd use the arrow keys or the ASWD keys to move around. It's similar to that. It's only using the joystick.